I've learned it, and so I was able to continue, go on, right on educating myself, because that was my responsibility to myself. And so I probably didn't need college a lot. It was sort of fun for a while. I learned to loathe, what do they call those things that are not sororities? Fraternities. I got to loathe fraternities and management and various other things. But I don't think I needed college. I think I'd learned how to educate myself at that point. And since I knew ever since I was 8 or 10 years old that I was a writer, I just didn't really know what kind. I knew I was a writer. Why shouldn't I be structuring my education along lines that were going to be useful to me? I think anybody who's understands, has some sense of what how they're supposed to behave in life, begins this area of self-education, and it doesn't necessarily have much to do with the formal stuff that you're getting.
I have a brief question, but then I'll look for questions from the outside so we can split the questions. But my brief question is, Mr. Albee, when Somerset Maugham was a young man before he became a playwright and a novelist, he learned a lot about life and death from working as a young intern in a hospital. Can you reflect on what you learned about life and death while working at Western Union for 2 years in New York?
Well, when I was 18 years old, my adoptive family and I parted company. They were wealthy. They had been giving me a very, very good education. However, it turned out that I was not the product they thought they had bought when they adopted me. We did not like each other. Our values were totally different. They were deeply conservative. It would be an insult to Republicans to call them Republicans. They were bigots. I disliked all of their values. I hate to think that if I had liked them, if I'd liked those people, I might have turned out like them. But anyway, I didn't. And I was determined to be a writer. I was not going to be what they wanted me to be. I was not going to be the lawyer or doctor or CEO, either in or out of jail, that they admired so much. I was not going to be any of those things. And I'd gotten thrown out of college, and I was told, you know, toe the line. Become what you're supposed to be, or get out. So, we were talking about me here. I said, we're not talking about what you want me to be. We're talking about who I am. Therefore, bye-bye. And so I left. And by leaving, I was disowned, disinherited, and went the enormous distance of 22 miles from Larchmont, New York to Greenwich Village in New York City, which was a lifetime difference, an extraordinarily wonderful difference. And found myself there, I made some friends in New York, in an environment, a cultural and psychological and physical environment that was absolutely wonderful and exciting in every aspect. And the only thing I had to do was find some way, you know, to make enough money for hamburgers and beer. You know, I mean, because we lived together, you know, everybody, we had 5 or 6 of us in 2-room apartments all the time, part of the sleep fast, we need the bed syndrome, you know. And nobody wanted much of anything except enough money to get by. And so I took a job delivering telegrams for Western Union. I took a couple of jobs before that, but I didn't like that. They were too structured and too responsible. And so I took a job delivering telegrams for Western Union. By this point, fortunately, we didn't have to go around on bicycles. We didn't have to wear uniforms. And we didn't have to deliver singing telegrams. What we had to do, and my scheduled area was the Upper West Side of New York City between 68th Street and 86th Street, between Central Park West and the Hudson River. In those days, most of that area was not particularly wealthy. A lot of tenements and rooming houses and poor people. It was a nice neighborhood. I liked it a lot. So I would go there and I would work and I would deliver telegrams. And I would get to meet an awful lot of very, very interesting people. people who receive telegrams, believe me, are very, very interesting, probably more interesting than people who don't receive telegrams. And I met a whole variety of people over those few years that I did that. But here was an interesting experience I had. When somebody dies in a New York City hospital, a telegram is sent from the New York City hospital to the survivors saying, in effect, Aunt Sadie died, come and pick up her body. New York City used to send these telegrams collect. Maybe still does, I don't know. And I would have to take these telegrams. And all of these people whose Aunt Sadies had died all lived on the 6th floor of a tenement walk-up. And so I would trudge up the stairs, and I would be expected to collect $1.85 from these people to give them the message about Aunt Sadie having died and come to pick her up before she rots, you know. So I figured out something very, very shrewd. I knew that if these people would read the telegram and then refuse it, they wouldn't have to pay for it. So if I went somewhere and it was a wealthy family and everything, you know, I'd collect the $1.85 and maybe get a 25-cent tip or something. That was nice. 25 cents went a long way toward very, very good soup in those days. But if it was a really poor family, I would say to them, this is terrible news. They want you to pay for it. They want you to pay $1.85 for this terrible news. What I want you to do is take down all the information, take it all down, and then give the telegram back to me and say very specifically, I refuse to accept this telegram. And so they would write all the information down, then hand me back the telegram and say, I refuse to accept this telegram. And so they didn't have to pay for it. Now, this was such a wonderful, selfless thing that I was doing. Was it not? Except that I had figured out somewhere along the line there that since they weren't paying for it, they might be a little more generous in a tip. So I usually came away with 50 cents. So that was very, very good. But knowing most of these people who lived in rooming houses, poor people living in rooming houses on the Upper West Side of New York City was indeed very instructive to me. And by the time I got to writing plays, and I wrote my play, The Zoo Story, several of the people who were mentioned in that play and are characters in that play undoubtedly came from the experience I had meeting these people while I was delivering telegrams for Western Union. I won't say that the adventure was particularly an intellectual one. It was far more an emotional experience of getting to know intimately many more people than I ever would have met otherwise. Hang on a second.
Yes.
There was a lady who got telegrams once a week and who would invite me into her apartment and take out her flashlight and open her mouth and flash the flashlight in so I could examine the growing cancers in her mouth. There was that lady. There were the people who sometimes invited me in to spend an hour or so horizontal. They were interesting, some of them. And sometimes I would do that. But the variety of experience of the people that I met, I think, was invaluable to me. You know, I'd been raised in this rarefied, wealthy environment and gone to private schools. There was a whole world that I really didn't know much about until I got to New York City and started taking subways and becoming, you know, a real person in a real world. And working for Western Union, meeting all of these people and getting to know all of them, the whole variety of it undoubtedly was very helpful to me, very valuable.